My name's Scott Pilot. I've been here in Duluth for the last 25 years. I work in the schools. I've done a lot of outdoor activities. I've been with the DAOA for several years. And one thing that we've been working through for the last 10 years, and have got a lot of buy-in from our local parks department, is this outdoor children's chart that you got handed on the way in. And so hopefully we don't have to spend a lot of time trying to sell people on that idea. One quick note is that there is like a Minnesota outdoor Bill of Rights for kids that they're working on too that's kind of got stalled. So this concept is moving along. I kind of got this idea from Ontario Outdoor Children's Charter. That's why ours in Duluth is a charter, not a Bill of Rights. But the idea is the same as trying to get every kid outside. And so today, because it's a regional Great Lakes symposium, I brought together a panel here from around the Great Lakes. We got some people that are working this issue. And so hopefully today you'll leave here kind of inspired on how we can do things to help get kids outside, and that get ideas for making connections either in this room or when you go back to wherever you're from. Because making connections and collaborations is really kind of a theme I've heard so far in the things I've seen today, and I think is really important when we talk about getting kids outside. So let's start with just introducing our panel here. And if we start with you, Sam, just give a quick brief intro.
Yeah. My name's Sam Loma. I'm the Programs and Operations Director at Chester Bowl here in Duluth. If you don't know what Chester Bowl is, we are a tiny ski hill nestled between UMD and St. Scholastica that offers year-round programming. So we have a pretty unique program to the region and even the United States in that we rent equipment out for the entire season. We start fitting people for about 1,200 sets of skis in October and November and 200 snowboards. Parents and families take that equipment home with them. They ski with us. They ski with all of our partner organizations. They take part in our free lessons, our other programming like Girls Shred, Freestyle Fridays, and an Alpine race program. And they spend their winters volunteering with us. So it's all about building community and reducing barriers. The other unique aspect to our winter program is that we offer scholarships, and so this year we're awarding $27,300 in scholarships to get people on snow and spending their winter with us. In addition to that, we have a summer camp. We serve about 130 kids a week, Monday through Thursday, June through August. So it's quite a bit of programming going on there.
My name's Ian Meeker. I work for the University of Wisconsin-Madison as an extension educator in Bayfield County, which is about an hour and a half east of here on the shores of Lake Superior. One of the programs that I oversee is the 4-H program, and we use that program to start a ski club, which is a project focused club. And then over time, my background before this job was I led wilderness trips with YMCA Camp Widgewagon and Outward Bound, and really enjoyed that time, but also felt like not everybody has the opportunity to access wilderness at a camp. And over time, where I live, there's a lot of, basically I was able to build a program called Superior Adventures, write some grants, get canoes and kayaks. Biking's a part of it as well. Some hiking. Partner with the schools, sometimes grade teachers, 6th grade, 7th grade, kind of middle school, sort of the target audience. And then also do some work with summer schools, and then we also allow kids to sign up, and we do trips in that format as well.
My name is Thurman Tucker. I'm with Quail Forever. Actually, we have 2 chapters that I work with. One is in Metro Twin Cities area, and the other one is in southeast Minnesota, which is down by the La Crosse area, but it's on the Minnesota side. Just briefly about the Minnesota side, that's where we started. The objective there is that we have quail here in the state of Minnesota. It used to be more plentiful than they are now. The numbers are way, way, way down. So our objective is let's bring those numbers back up. The Twin Cities chapter, that's the southeast. The Twin Cities chapter primarily is just getting youth connected more with nature. So I have 2 focuses on both those chapters, and I'm the coordinator of both of those chapters. My real interest started years and years ago when I started off hunting. It just stuck with me, and I just love to walk the fields, whether I get something or don't, watching a dog and all that. It's just great stuff. I want to pass it on to young people to get them out, whatever they're doing. But more specifically now, with our bird numbers in North America going down so drastically, just to give you an idea here, since 1970, mind you, North America, we have lost 2.9 billion birds. That's a bunch of birds. Now, to give it an idea, too, when you look at that now, pheasants, and I'm talking about the pheasant range here, just the pheasants, we've lost 70% of the pheasants since 1970. On the bobwhite quail, the one we're trying to help in southeast, we've lost 83%, and this is in the quail range. The quail range goes from South Dakota over to Minnesota, the northern range, Wisconsin over to New York, down to Florida, over to Texas. So it's a huge range. But in that range, we've lost 83% of the quail population since 1966. And the shift has gone now to not just locating quail here in the state, we're now trying to come up with ways that we can improve the habitat. So we have an ambitious stewardship program going, and maybe I can talk about that a little later. But that's what really we're trying to get the kids into. It's good to go out and hunt, look at birds, but we need to do something about those 2.9 billion birds going down, and they're continually going down. Anyway, that's me.
My name is Michael Einbach. I'm with the Bus for Outdoor Access and Teaching, which, to break it down, we have a bus. We work with different partner organizations. That could be a school teacher, that could be a Parks and Rec department, that could be an affinity group, a nonprofit. We bring the bus to them. The bus has enough camping gear, equipment, food, supplies, and it comes with a guide to take up to 30 people camping. And then we help that person run their own camping trip. So when people hear the teaching part, that's the bus, the outdoor access. The teaching part is often helping those leaders that we work with in a community serve their community through running a trip. So the way we look at it is we're trying to bring other people's mission outside. Our mission is simple: get more people outside. So our number is not birds, it's number of days that people are outside. The way that we do that is by partnering with other organizations and helping whatever their mission is fit into the outdoors in a way that continues to feel like them and doesn't feel like a new program coming in, but is actually an extension of their existing work.
All right, great. So that's our outstanding panel from around the region. And getting back to kind of like Adventure Gap in particular, I'd like each of you to talk about some perspective on the challenges or obstacles you encounter in getting kids outside and specifically getting all kids outside. Let's just go down the line.
Well, like skiing and snowboarding is an expensive sport. Like if you close your eyes and you think of the average skier or snowboarder, in my mind it's the rich people, it's the people that have like the Mercedes that they're pulling up in the parking lot with or the giant SUV or whatnot. And so like the biggest challenge that we have is just the expense of participating in a sport like that, or even the expense of participating in a summer camp, or you name it, any outdoor program that we're offering. Aside from the expense, it's also the idea of whether or not you belong. And so like I'm blanking on her name right now, but there was a wonderful presentation earlier this morning about how to get the BIPOC community involved. You have to have people that look like them in the outdoors and participating. And so like those are pretty big challenges, and the way that we've started to approach that is by offering significant scholarships, making things easier for families to participate, making the opportunities more plentiful, and then partnering with organizations that serve youth in our region. So partnering with Center City Housings, partnering with Northwood Children's Services, places that are near us that have those populations of kids that are underserved.
I think the biggest challenge is transportation. Identifying, so the program that I lead called Superior Adventures, we can put together a registration site. Typically it gets cherry picked by the parents that understand the value of what we're doing, but we don't reach the kids that we really want to expose that haven't had the exposure. So then we partnered with the schools, specifically in the summer would be with summer schools, but then you're working with larger groups and you're also dealing with transportation again. I have access to a 12-passenger van, which is critical. I would be there's no way I could do the program I do, and then you also run into having the resources. A couple of grants allows me to have the canoes and kayaks and access to bikes, which allows me to provide the programming at no cost. Obviously, financial issues is a barrier as well.
I think our biggest issue, like I said, both chapters that go with the Southeast, we've partnered with schools down in Houston County. We got 5 schools we're partnering with. And the idea there is to get those kids outdoors. They love every minute of it, to get away from classrooms. And not that we're trying to pull them away from classrooms, but they do love getting outdoors. So we don't really have an issue there. Busing sometimes can be, depending on what school we're working with there, but the kids really love to get outside. The metro area is a little different. The metro area, busing is an issue as far as getting kids from one place to the next. And the biggest thing we have is that we get the kids. They don't seem to be a problem, but we need adults to kind of come along, to be chaperones, be good examples for the young people and all. So that's really a challenge. So the metro area, we don't have the school kids like we do in the Southeast. And so trying to get the kids, we pretty much our chapter, both Christian-based, and so we've been working with churches in the metro area primarily. When COVID hit, that threw a mucking wrench in our program. I mean, because that's where we were getting the kids from the churches. So now we got to go out and get them from other locations and all, which is fine. We want to do that. But that's our biggest issue, is really getting the adults to come along, because you get 20, 30 kids, you're going to need some adults to help you out with that.
Yeah, I think there's a range of factors, and I imagine, who does environmental education in the room? Show of hands, a handful of folks. So if I say the word limiting factor, some of y'all may know that word, but the idea is, let's say that you're in an ecosystem and you need nitrogen and you need oxygen. If you have all the oxygen in the world but not enough nitrogen, the ecosystem is still not going to be able to produce. And we run into the same factor. Like, we can list all these variables, but at the end of the day, a limit in any one of those variables is going to limit people's ability to participate outside. I think there are 2 ones that I see as a limiting factor more often. One we talked about is cost. Your average cost for an overnight expedition program, if you're looking at like multi-day expeditions, is typically between $200 and $350. When you're looking, that's per person per day. That's the best way to compare, is you look at programs, you say, how much does it cost per person per day with final enrollment? You look at like a YMCA camp that tends to have a little more structure around it, you're still looking at like $150 to $175. And those are real costs. It's insurance, it's land, it's transportation, it's gear, it's equipment. We've built a very efficient model. I'm proud that last year we got it down to $108.09 per person per day. That's still a lot of money. So cost is a big factor, and you need folks to be willing to pay. And that's the other one, is willingness. I'll do another show of hands. Who here likes to camp? I have really bad news for you all. I like to camp, but the vast majority of human history is a tale of people desperately doing whatever they can their entire lives to make sure that they and their descendants never have to do what we choose to do for fun. I've done camping programs for refugee groups, and their parents look at me and they say, we got out of camps. We got out of tents. Why are you trying to put my kids back in a tent? We do programs for folks whose ancestors left farming communities in the rural South to come up to the cities because they wanted the economic opportunity that provides. And I think when we get into these spaces, we sometimes forget, because we're surrounded by people who love camping and have had that experience, that if you haven't had the experiences and the opportunities we've had, a lot of what we do is not actually a very appealing proposition. And we've got to get through that barrier as well. When you can break through that willingness, and then you can figure out, how am I going to get the funding to help people break through that willingness, then you get people buying in. And like, I love camping. None of what I'm saying is to say that camping is a bad thing or that you shouldn't love it, but I think we sometimes forget what we're up against out there.
All right. When we look on our charter, we were really intentional on trying to get some things done, and I want to kind of hit briefly on some of the top areas there. So Ian, could you talk a little bit about developing mastery and how important it is, and maybe some challenges and things you've been successful with?
So, playing off a little bit what Micah was saying, it reminded me of a story at a time when, because I had experienced taking wilderness trips into the Boundary Waters, and I thought, you know what, these kids, at-risk kids in the Twin Cities, they need to get up and have a Boundary Waters experience. What ended up being was that I was bringing them to a place I thought they should be, and they really didn't want to be there. And so the mastery level piece I think of in terms of the outdoor ed, the skiing, the canoeing, the kayaking, it's providing immediate feedback, whether they can control where their canoe goes or not. It's limited instruction, and then they're just doing it. It's very hands-on. And then over time, they start to develop their confidence, and they become more successful. All of those outdoor movement skills are, what's I think is kind of unique about it is that the person that's just learning how to cross-country ski can be right next to the person that is, racing at the high school level, or somebody's, been a lifetime skier. But they're basically doing the same thing. One's just a little more efficient than the other. And they're sharing that space. So there's, opportunities for, coaching and mentoring. And that, along with, like, the idea of being outside, mastery is so many different levels. Are they mastering their ability to dress appropriately for where they are? What I tend to work with is a lot of first-time experiences. So if I'm taking some kids out kayaking, I'm going to make sure that I talk about the safety aspects of what's going on, so that they don't think like, oh, I went and kayaked one time and now I can go kayak on Lake Superior anytime I want. You talk about weather, you talk about paying attention, and so that's the way I guess I think of mastery is when you're dealing with kids, they're not going to master what you're introducing them to, but you're trying to introduce it to them in a way that is enjoyable, so they think, hey, so if you're going to go out with some people that don't want to camp, give them a decent something to sleep on, so that at least they, are going to be able to be comfortable at night.
Okay, so before you get to mastery, you have to be exposed to a lot of activities. And I think sometimes a lot of programming only just kind of stops at that exposure piece. But it's, as we just kind of heard, it's really necessary to have kids just experience stuff, and, for the first time and a couple of times before they can take on and want to go to that mastery level. So Sam, you want to talk about providing like a year-round range of activities?
Yeah, so, I mean, in Duluth, the winters get really long and they're really cold, but we also have a lot of wonderful opportunities. And I'm going to start with summer camp. One of the best things that I've heard during parent pickup at the end of the day was a parent kind of just looking around, watching the kids, and they say, wow, these kids look so happy and healthy. And it was towards the end of the summer camp, and all of that experience throughout the summer had really accumulated in these kids to the point where they were happy, they were confident. They were dirty as all get up and sunburnt probably, but it was a really good day and a really good opportunity for them. And that needs to continue into the winter, but it also needs to continue into the rest of their life. If we want a happy and healthy community that's resilient, we need to have outdoor rec, and that needs to start when kids are real little, so that way they have that exposure. And I'm going to shout out Megan Morrow, who's in the room. She runs a really cool program, a nature outdoor play school. My kids have been fortunate enough to go there, and you start off with these preschoolers, and they learn to be outside. They learn all these skills. They learn that they can be outside in all sorts of weather and enjoy it and make it through it and have fun. And that's one of the important things that we all learn through outdoor rec, right? Like outdoor type 2 fun. When you're in the middle of a thunderstorm on a camping trip, those are the stories you're going to tell. If you tip your canoe in the Boundary Waters and you lose your food pack and have to find it, those are the stories you're going to tell. And those are the experiences that kids and adults and everybody need in order to experience the outdoors, and they need to be exposed to that. And in order to do that, we need to all provide opportunities for people to get outside and really, really make that accessible and reduce as many barriers as possible.
Can I play off that a second?
Sure, yep.
So one thing the American Camping Association did an evaluation of the impact that overnight camps have on kids. And they found out that positive camps have the kids overwhelmingly have positive experiences, right? Actually, a negative camp can create a negative experience, so it goes both ways. But they looked at what is the dosage, how many days you need to be at camp to have that positive experience, and it came to 2 days. So, it's great that somebody has a chance to go to a 3-week camp, but even having a one-night, overnight, 2-day experience ends up being a really positive experience for the kids that are a part of it.
Yeah, I guess I'd say I see that like with when kids were little, like raising kids, they only like one night is a huge deal in the life of a kid. We in the community seem to, want weeks or mountains and giant trips, and we want to bring that right away to kids. But it sounds like what you're saying is that like sometimes smaller activities, really well targeted, can meet kids' needs just as well.
I would say it has the same impact.
Yeah. Okay. So now to get to these exposure and mastery things, we need to have access. Mike, could you talk a little bit about access and getting kids to places?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. There's a couple ways to look at access, and one is very simple. And as someone with a bus, we get this question a lot. It's can you get us there? And that is important. So like anything we can do to figure out how to make it easier to get people to remote places is important. But that's really hard because like there's only so many ways to move people around. Like there's big campaigns. I know we've done a lot of work with Sierra Club, and they're doing a lot of work around transit to trails, figuring out how we can try and get more public transit to outdoor access points. But I think the other side of accessibility is once you're there, how do you make sure you have that positive experience and not that negative experience? And that is fundamentally part of the access problem. Because if you get a bunch of folks, and I've worked for programs that do this, they like get them there and they kind of dump them off, but the experience itself isn't pleasant. You're not necessarily doing a favor, especially when you go back to what I was saying earlier about that lens of we're often trying to convince people that this is a good idea. And we're working uphill against a lot of other variables. So thinking about all the things you can do, and I'm sure we can get into more on this on the panel, to make sure that once you're there, that experience remains positive is really important. And I think a lot of us, I certainly grew up in a lot of environments where we had that conversation about like, part of what makes the experience valuable is the challenge. Part of what makes the experience valuable is the fact that you got wet, the fact that you got cold, the fact that you survived. That is a mentality. That is not the only mentality for what it can be like to be outside. It's a very predominant one in our space. It's one that I participate in, and I love. Like, if I'm going out on my own, I don't even like hiking on a trail. Like, I want to get whacked by some thorns and bushwhacking. Like, that for me is fun, but that's not true for a lot of other people. And thinking about, can we tell different stories that don't necessarily need to center on hardship and don't necessarily need to center on like the suffering and the growth from suffering? There's other narratives for outdoor experience that can be more accessible to folks and can involve comfort and can involve safety. It doesn't mean you take out the risk of it, but I think we sometimes rely too heavily on that notion of like you have to have a hard time outside, and that's where the learning comes from. Good learning comes from that. I love running trips where kids have a hard time, but we also lose a lot of people in the process. Good learning also comes from a trip that happens on sunny days and nothing too crazy happens, and they just have a good time outside listening to birds. And I want to make sure that we make space in the narratives we tell to leave room for that as a valid experience outside as well.
Well, and then a key part to having access and ability to do these things is making sure we take care of our areas. And so stewardship is part of our charter and getting kids involved in that. So Thurman, you want to talk a little bit about that and how you've had success?
Yes, I will. Before doing that, just touch a little bit on as far as what kids, let's say inner city kids I've ran into have issues with camping. I know a lot of people grow up in the suburbs, and like I think he was saying, in Mercedes and all these other fancy vehicles. A lot of inner city kids don't come from those types of environments. So I would, and this is just a suggestion on my part, for us who are trying to get kids outdoors, I think if we can look at it and ask them what really appeals to them. I look at it the same way with music. Some people love rock music, some like classic, some like R&B. I might like whatever, but the kids don't like it. So it's important to find out what they kind of go for. And what we've found that when we take kids out, if we can take them to a farm where there are animals and things that they love that. Camping, I'm just sorry, inner city kids, my experience, we just haven't had a lot of experience with that, you know. Anyway, getting over to the stewardship part, In our world here today, and it's just the way we were raised, I'm just not trying to point fingers on anybody, but just the way we were raised. We are primarily consumers, and all of us are, really. And we're raised that way. But when you look at what's going on in our environment, and I look at the families, in other words, I look at the homes, and I look at the habitat, both are suffering tremendously. And I look as for stewardship, I just want to start with the environmental part of it. We need everybody to look at it. You know what? I'm a consumer on this earth. I should be a steward on this earth. Those days are over to me when you just get, and not put but back. When I grew up, it was always said, I want to make this world a better place to leave it than when I got here. Somehow or another, I don't hear people saying it. We're consuming stuff right and left. So we want to try to get the young people to look at more, I have a responsibility. And it's not a hard work thing, but it's just a little bit. And we, again, gauge it to what the kids can handle. Like, for instance, in the Southeast, we have a school that we take them out 3-4 times a year at one school just to do some habitat work. And it's very, very easy stuff, building brush piles, planting pollinated gardens, planting different other types of seeds that the birds can enjoy. They like that stuff, you know, but to get them to buy into it is not easy because we were not raised that way. And so we're looking at a different objective, trying to get kids now to look at, you know, this is my responsibility. If we can get the young people to look at that, I think we're going to be able to be better people on this earth. Just to give you an idea, and I mention this to people, most Americans, we have the needs, we have the necessary needs. We have the cars, we have trucks, we have the houses, we have the clothing, food. What's hurting us, and it gets, I'm going to show you how it's going to hurt wildlife. What's hurting us and wildlife, it's not that the needs we're after these luxuries. That's really what's hurting us, and we step back and look at that, and so I want the kids to understand this now. Let's say you have a farmer or whoever, but this is just the way we are. We have all these other things we need, but now we got so many things now, houses. The attic is full, the garage is full, the closet is full, the basements are full. Now we got to go to a storage facility. Something ain't right with that picture. Then you look at what's happening on wildlife, like I say, you look at 2.9 billion birds, that's just on birds. And that's because of habitat destruction. Again, you're looking at not to criticize farmers, we got to have them, but just say here's a guy that's doing very well, and he has a cornfield, bean field, or whatever, it's an acre or two over there, that's brush. Well, I want to convert that to more corn. Well, they can do it, but I'm going to buy more golf clubs. You look at that. So for us to get the mentality, it's not the needs. We have the needs, and we got to have the needs taken care of, but it's this pursuit of luxuries. And in Twin Cities, we're building storage facilities right and left because people need to store stuff because we have so much stuff. So we're trying to get it over to the young people. Hopefully we can change this way we're going. And so that's really our mission now, is trying to get young people to come on, and the older people too. Again, we all are concerned.
Yeah, one thing, or a couple of things you mentioned there, Thurman, that sparked me as you were talking, was trying to get kids what they're interested in, and then also at the same time teaching them the importance of stewardship. And I think when I've heard a lot of talk about this, we get narrow focused on things, and there's a chicken and an egg thing. And part of the thing of the charter and going with all access, experience, exposure, mastery, is that it takes all of us, the whole community, a whole bunch of collaborations to get kids there. As an educator, I think of this as like reading. You can't ask a kid what they want to read until you taught them to read. Like they can't choose to get into science fiction or historical fiction or nonfiction if they aren't fluent with reading and been exposed to those things. And then once we get them there, then we can do that. So. A bus driving around the thing, a Chester Bowl, really neat thing, a 4-H program, a Quail Forever piece. None of them can solve this or make this happen, individually. But it's the collaborations and making sure that we're all kind of having a vision of this. So that's kind of why we're here. We have this up the whole time. Is our community is dedicated to that. We've got our Parks Department to do it. Our schools are starting to come on board. All of our community activities, our paddlers, our climbers, our bikers, our skiers, have been, involved in creating this document. So we have a lot of opportunity there. And so kind of, on that, to keep myself out of talking, is I want to hear from you. We'll just go on down the line again, is what do you see as or the future of this, or what you've been successful with, and maybe some collaborations that have been successful for you.
So we've been really successful at Chester by trying to keep our program prices as low as possible and trying to provide space for organizations and kids that may not have the resources to be able to participate. One of the partnerships that I'll highlight is our partnership with Center City Housing. These are kids whose family, they're living in transitional housing, and they don't really have the most stable home life. They have parents that love them, but their parents are dealing with breakups and relationships, you name it, whatever landed them in transitional housing. And it's really hard to think about getting your kids signed up for a summer camp when you're just barely making it through your week or your day. So one of the things that we have done that's been extremely helpful is every year when we open registration, we reserve a handful of spots for kids that live in Center City Housing. And I go down there and I register the kids with the parents. We have a day where just the parents cycle through. We give the parents free food. There's child care for the kids that are not school age yet, so that way the parents, I have their full attention. I can explain what's going on, and we provide that to them for free. So, it's an opportunity to get kids outside that wouldn't normally have that opportunity. The other thing that we do that has been really successful is our scholarship program. And almost to our own detriment. We actually, for the first time ever last year, had to cap our scholarships because we just, as an organization, could not absorb the need anymore. We at one point had awarded close to $60,000 in scholarships in a single fiscal year, and had only raised about $30,000. So we ate a significant amount of dollars, but we felt really strongly about getting people outside. Now we have a application process, and we award scholarships by need as much as we can, and there is a huge need out there. So there's opportunities for you to partner with your Parks and Rec organizations, partner with organizations like the Northland Foundation in Duluth here that have actually funded things like the Adventure Gap to provide scholarships, to get kids into programming, to get people outside, and to give them the opportunity to experience the outdoors. Aside from that, we have had really, really great success with creating a community at Chester through our Peace in the Park policy, which has been in place. It was started by our former director, Tom Storm, back in the 80s, and we've just continued to make that our motto and our guiding principles. And it states that everybody is welcome at Chester Bowl regardless of your background. So it doesn't matter what you look like, doesn't matter how much money you make, doesn't matter what car you drive. You are welcome, and we will treat you with respect. You will treat others with respect. You will be kind, and you will be a part of our community. And that kind of goes back to the stewardship aspect that Thurman was just talking about, where that stewardship goes beyond taking care of the world around you and taking care of your things in your corner of the earth. It goes beyond that, in that you have to take care of your community too, and you have to look out for one another, and you have to create this community of outdoor enthusiasts and people that care about you in order to feel good about yourself and feel safe in a space. And I've been really proud about the work that we've been able to do around that at Chester Bowl, and I really hope that we can continue to do that.
Adam, can you bring up the slide of the group? Other direction. Keep going. All right, so one more. Two more. So this is a group of Bayfield middle school students. There, we were just getting done spending a day harvesting manoomin, wild rice. The reason I think this, and not only that, but in the end, I always ask them the question: give me a thumbs down, thumbs sideways, thumbs up. How'd the day go? Right? And it's pretty resounding thumbs up. It was a great day. It was initially going to rain that day, and we almost canceled, and we didn't, and it worked out great. the reason I wanted this slide up is this didn't come out of nowhere. It takes time to develop the connections and the relationships with the school districts, the trust. One bad experience could kill your program, right? Over time, the school district Bayfield is also the Red Cliff Reservation goes to that school. It's about 70% native. It's a target audience that I've traditionally had difficulty programming with because they're hard to pin down at times to schedule trips. And so I go to them through the school district and started with a buddy of mine that we started doing some canoe trips and we did some kayaking. They do some adventure trips during the spring and built it up over 10 years time. And then when the time came where they had a new administrator and they said, we want to get the kids out harvesting manoomin and get them to understand their culture and integrate that into the school, it kind of fell on my lap, right, because I was the canoe guy. And it's been a great program. We've done it for the last 5 years. It takes a while. We have to drive a ways to get to the rice, but that has been a real successful, you don't know when it's going to happen, but you have to, spend time, celebrate your successes, and start small and do it well, and build those connections, and then find the people, the low-hanging fruit, the people that want to do programming like this, that see the benefit of it, and work with that. But I just wanted to quickly highlight that because it's just one of those classic photos where you'd say, what is the impact? The impact is significant for those kids. A lot of those native kids it's a privilege to me, but it's that I'm teaching native kids how to canoe. There's an irony to that, but they do really enjoy the time out on the water and learning how to harvest wild rice.
I'd like to say, too, that we've had great success with our Metro chapter in getting kids out of all things trap shooting. I did have a problem with some of the schools when I brought the brochure showing and I showed them a gun. Oh, we don't want anything. This is metro area now. Southeast don't have no problem with guns. And I understand what they're saying. But we have enough kids in our group that the guys really, really, really love eating it. They eat it up. And so we were very successful as far as getting guys out. I tell them, hey, we're going to go trap shooting. Oh, yeah, let's go. So that was one of those things, again, trying to find what they appreciate as much as you can. Another thing we found that works well for us, like I said, we're kind of a Christian base. I'm not pushing that strong, but like somebody was saying, some of these homes are so messed up. We have kind of what we call a learning center before we go out. And we teach the kids 3 basic things. Respect your parents, stay in school, and respect other people. Those, just trying to do those, because a lot of these inner city kids that we're dealing with, I mean, it's almost no structural foundation they're coming from. It's just, you know what you want to do. So it's a challenge. So you're getting back to stewardship. Again, we're looking at these people, young people that really need help. And so we have to kind of mentor them on, lead them on, teach them on, and then get their opinions. You want to hear from them. So we tell them, hey, you're part of a family. It's just like you're playing a football, basketball team or whatever. Those coaches tell them, you run into something, you let me know. And we say the same thing to these kids. Hey, you're part of this group here. We want to help you out as much as possible. But there are a few things in the metro area we've had good success with. Apple picking is another one. Going to Cabela's, which is a wildlife it's basically an outfitter's store in the Twin Cities that handles all kinds of stuff. Kids love it. They see stuff, mounted elephants, hippos, lions, tigers. They love that stuff. And so again, those are the things we've had great success with the inner city kids and all. And each area is going to be different, but as much as you can, try to find out what really touches their button, so to speak.
I heard 2 parts of the question. 1, what makes good collaboration? And 2, what does the future potentially look like? I think on the front of collaboration, every program we run is a partnership with another organization. We've helped over 40 organizations run their own camping trips. So we've seen a lot of collaboration, and some of them have been bad. And consistently, the thing that has not worked is when you don't have a mentor from the community you're serving involved in the program. And there's really good research going, I mean, we have research going back to the 90s, which I hate to say is like old research now, around how having a mentor be part of the process of someone connecting to the outdoors is important for that connection to the outdoors being sustained. So that's one of the things we look for is there someone in our partner organization who will help serve in that mentorship capacity beyond the scope of the trip? Because while we know, we often say the benefits of outdoor programs are lifelong, and like I believe that, and that's true, a lot of the effects that we see actually only persist for about 3 months in terms of actual like research on them. Absolutely lifelong impacts, but when you look at like academic outcomes, we know that people who go on outings of some sort have 27% higher test scores for about 8 to 10 weeks after that program, and then that effect declines. So there are effects that are lost if you don't have some sort of continuity. Continuity can be more time outside, but it can also be that mentor figure who can help that person persist in some other way because that connection goes on beyond. I also think that is recognizing that welcoming is an action and not just a belief. And if your program's always looked some kind of way and you haven't made structural changes, like you need to start looking at what are some of the structural changes we can make. The good news is having that mentorship figure can help in a big way. One of the things that, and this is not my doing, I have to give full credit to our program director, David, who's over in the front, if anyone wants to embarrass him over there. But every time we run a trip to Hamtramck, which is a kind of city enclave in Detroit, he stops by a halal grocery store so that we can make sure that the food that we're getting can be eaten by everyone on the trip, regardless of their faith. Those little things make a huge difference in terms of the impact. In terms of where it's going in the future, I'm actually going to pivot to talk about the money piece because I think we've figured out a lot of ways to make programs more inclusive, but we all spoke to it, like funding this is hard. I really think we need to start bringing better arguments to people with resources about why they should fund these kinds of programs. For example, we know that people who have exposure to outdoor spaces regularly throughout their week are 25% less likely to need to go to an infirmary or a doctor. There are studies on that. Can we get people in healthcare to start funding this? There's a couple states that are starting to look at insurance groups, and like a lot to complain about with insurance, but if they're willing to start writing prescriptions for time outside and funding those programs, that's great, and they should. And the reason they should is because we also have studies that show a 60% reduction in anxiety from people who have spent time outside, which guess what, is outperforming many pharmaceuticals. So can we look at dollars from them? I imagine we have some folks who work in schools. I imagine that those of you who work in schools have very well-funded sports teams. Consider going to your administrators, if you're able to do this, and reminding them that your average game of football is 900 times more likely to result in an emergency room visit than an entire day of time outside doing adventure activities, and then look at the funding comparison. And then ask them, if that, especially anyone at a university, we've seen in universities that outdoor programs at the beginning of someone's college experience have a 4% increase in retention at the university long term. Do you know how much that is in tuition dollars? It pays for itself many times over, and other programs don't have that same effect. If we start to look at more of those long-term benefits, that gives us the opportunity to go to folks who are getting those benefits in sort of a public sense and say, hey, we can prove this. Here's the studies showing that this effect is here. You have dollars. Do you want to see this effect in your schools, amongst your youth, in the healthcare system you support? Those are folks who have dollars, and I think as we get more research in this space, we'll be able to make more and more the case that this is an intentional intervention you can make in other experiences. And that intervention is not just about getting people outside because of the inherent good, which I believe in, but a lot of the people with money need a little more than that. So if they can start to see it as an intervention and other metrics that they care about, I do think that there's funding and resources to make more of this stuff happen.
All right, thank you. I'm going to take questions now. So after lunch, I'm going to encourage everyone to take a couple of seconds and stretch, move your feet in a different position, stand up if you want to. I mean, I'm having a hard time digesting here myself, and we've been talked at a lot. So I want to recognize that this is a panel, but I'm going to throw the panel out there. There's way more experience out there than there is up here. And so folks that might think that they have a good question or a comment or a personal experience that talks what we've talked about, he is going to bring you the extra mic. Yeah.
I'm going to do that.
Mr. Fournier, Adam Fournier from Duluth Parks and Recreation, everybody. Yeah, there you go.
Question or a comment. So my name's Alice Tibbetts, and I own the North Shore Adventure Park in Silver Bay. And what we are seeing in our trade association is a pattern that if parents are not going outside and not taking their kids outside, then that whole next generation is not experiencing these outdoor opportunities. So we're seeing it in for-pay operations as well. But my main question and comment is that what I'm not hearing is we want to teach kids independence, self-direction, and an ability to really navigate on their own in their communities. And in Duluth, the feedback that we get in our group, Vibrant Streets Duluth, which has the mission of getting more kids on bikes and out as pedestrians, is that we don't have little pocket parks or places that kids can get to easily on their own. We haven't prioritized safe bike routes or pedestrian routes between neighborhoods and our larger parks. And I think if we want kids to appreciate the outdoors, they have to also be able to do it on their own independently as part of their everyday lives, not just as part of structured top-down organizations. And I'd like you to comment on that, because when I grew up, I had a park in every neighborhood I lived in that I could walk to. That's not possible in Duluth. Thank you.
Yeah, very good point, and I totally agree with everything you've said. I grew up out in Lakewood. My parents, I was fortunate enough to grow up in the woods, and I played outside 100% of the time, and it was wonderful. I live in the city now, and my own kids don't have that opportunity, and you kind of look around and you go, well, I know that neighbor's got a pit bull that's not very good, and I know that neighbor's a little sketchy, and you know, there's all sorts of stuff. And one of the ways that we've addressed that in Chester, because it is a city park, it is a hub for the neighborhood, and there's a lot of kids that walk to the park and play, we start to develop outdoor skills and confidence, and we teach them how to use public transportation in our summer camps. So we don't take a school bus as much anymore. We still do for big trips like to Gooseberry. But we'll take the DTA, we'll pack 50 kids onto the DTA bus, we'll take them downtown, we'll hike kids all over town, oftentimes doing about a 5-mile loop in a day. So that way these kids get the experience to move themselves from camp to a place and back and get that experience. And along the way you see a whole bunch of stuff. You see all the things that we all see in town or in your own neighborhoods, and we work through it with the campers. The other thing that we do that kind of builds this resilience is we have this whole youth volunteer program where starting in 7th grade, we call them our cadets, and they help out in the winter, they help out in the summer, and we teach them leadership skills, we teach them skills to apply for their first jobs, but we teach them a lot of behavior management and conflict resolution skills that play into their life inside their community. So when you come across somebody who's extremely angry or disturbed or having an issue, or if you have an argument in your own personal life, you can navigate that in a way that's respectful to them, respectful and safe to you, and then be able to move on from that thing. And that has been one of the most rewarding things that I get to do, is because I get to work with these young people and build up their resilience and build up their confidence and ability to navigate the world around them. So that's some of the ways that we've addressed that, but it is a huge issue, and there's not a magic bullet for it. I really wish there was. Do you guys have anything to?
I'd like to add to it. It's a good question, but my experience in every neighborhood I think is going to be different. But I know in North Minneapolis and St. Paul, same thing. It's hard to get a lot of these kids outdoors, and it'd be nice if they would independently say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go out roller skating, I'm going to go out and watch birds or whatever it might be. But I think, and again, not trying to point fingers here, but I think the parents sometimes have given these kids so many things. A lot of times the parents don't have time to work with them. Hey, you got that video, just go play upstairs or whatever. So the kids really don't have the initiative in themselves, from what I've seen, that really want to go out and just do things, be independent and all. So it gets back again to that family structure. It's so challenging, hard for some of these kids to come to that level and say, hey, I'm going to do such and such. And yes, we do the best we can as far as trying to mentor, train, help, teach these young people to be more independent. But again, if that home base is kind of rocky, you know, and I know when I grew up, there were parks and still parks all over, and you would see kids all over. You don't hardly see any kids in the Twin Cities. You don't see kids in the park. They're playing in their games, you know, and it's just, but anyway, I'm like you. I wish it was a magic bullet or whatever, but it's a very, very complex thing. But yes, we want to make them, get them to be more independent. So, hey, we want to do whatever. And it's going to take time, but I agree. I wish it was a simple thing.
Yeah, I think that's the whole point of the charter. And when I try to emphasize mastery, is like when kids have mastery, then they can do it on their own, then they have that independence. And then we're engaging them rather than distracting them with a video game, you know. And when we are intentional with our programming that exposes them stuff and has that thing to mastery, I always say, like, we don't want to turn these things into like Valley Fair things where they just get on a bus, go, and kind of, hell, I had fun, but it's not me. Like, they don't take, we've got to, you know, it's got to be really intentional and turn it into something that's a skill for them and something they can revisit. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Zoe Barini, and I'm from the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. This panel is titled The Adventure Gap, so I was just wondering if each of you could define that, and where do you differ on those explanations, or how that applies to each of your organizations or missions?
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt to that. That's a big question, so let's try to give your best, you know, brief explanation of that.
All
so
right.
We have more questions.
I'll try and do this fast. So the adventure gap, as I understand it, is the recognition that when you look at certain demographic factors, especially related to race and economic status in the United States, you tend to see that people who have a white, higher income background are more likely to be able to experience spaces and go on adventures. And part of the reason for that is because at the end of World War II, we had a glut of economic resources and had mostly geared our entire economy towards warfare. And warfare requires the production of boots and waterproof boats and tents and materials, and we had to figure out what to do with that. And we invested heavily in a burgeoning middle class that we mostly invested in a white burgeoning middle class. So the people who got to start to experience the new public lands we'd made in the 40 years before that, who had access to resources, equipment, loans for housing, the people who could participate in recreation and purchase that equipment tended to be white families that were impacted by the GI Bill. And that's actually the history of a lot of outdoor recreation when we moved away from like hunting, fishing, and woodcraft to using equipment that we carried with us to go camping. A lot of that is tied to the war and how we invested in communities after the war. So I think a lot of that goes back to the question that was asked previously around like the experience of youth and young people. At the end of the day, a lot of outdoor recreation in America came from an investment in military technology that we converted to recreation, and that investment was outsized in certain communities. And we don't really talk about that history in the space. We talk about like out of Leopold and the environmental movement, and all that is true, but there was an economic background there that was really problematic. And if you want more people to get outside, we need to look at the investments that we made that created that surge in the first place and ask ourselves, what is the public policy that could do that again in an equitable manner?
And that was probably the best definition I've heard in a long time. So like addressing that, like one of the ways that we do that at Chester, and we actually were awarded a grant through the Northland Foundation that was titled The Adventure Gap, and it was associated with targeting minority groups within our community and getting them outside. And so that was honestly where our relationship with Center City Housing developed. We started working with the school districts that are further away from Chester Bowl. When we look at our demographics, majority of our participants are from the higher income zip codes in Duluth. And so what can we do to target the zip codes that we are underserving? And ironically, it's like the zip code I live in, which is right next to the park. You know, it's the Myers-Wilkins neighborhood, which is a lower income, higher minority neighborhood that we were woefully underserving. And so one of the things that we started doing was developing a relationship with that school. We've done a couple of field trips with their first graders, walking them from the school to the park, giving them a day in the park, letting them experience the different trails, doing a little bit of nature immersion program, like basically just letting them build forts and play outside, and then walking them back to the school. And it was amazing to us because like we had kids that had grown up in the neighborhood and never set foot in the park. And we had one little kid grab our hand and say, "I'm scared because I'm in the woods." He lives in the neighborhood. It's like this park was, we walked by his house. So it's one of those things where these kids are just really, really underserved, and that's some of the ways that we're trying to handle that.
And literally in Duluth, we have an adventure gap between east and west side of our city. Another question? We have time for maybe one more.
Got one more for me back here.
Nope.
I got the mic.
Okay.
He gave it to me. I had my hand up a long time ago. So my name is Kim Pearson. I live here in Duluth. I'm a 35-year retired physical education and adaptive physical education teacher. I'm also a board member of a nonprofit between Duluth and Two Harbors called Above and Beyond With You. And my question is this. We've talked about some of the barriers to the great outdoors. And I'm a huge believer in the great outdoors. I've been doing it my entire life as an educator. We talked about families that struggle with money. We talked about transportation can be a barrier. We talked about, what were the other barriers up there? Some diversity in our populations. Where do the children with disabilities fit into the picture? Because one of the greatest barriers for all people with disabilities, especially children with disabilities, to get into the great outdoors is accessibility to programs. Can a blind child go to Chester Bowl and ski in the program? Can a special education class of 30 students get on that bus and go camping? Can a child with autism go on a habitat experience? You know, where this is our nonprofit as well, as we're looking at how activities can be inclusive and accessible for all. So I think that's a big barrier, and how do we address that?
Well, we are committed to universal design, and we have a great program in Duluth called Northland Adaptive. Okay, so yeah, we partner and include them, and if you were at the last Adventure Gap meeting at the Bowl Club, we had a person from Northland Adaptive speak specifically to. Couldn't agree more. And so I think that I apologize for the questions we didn't get. I kind of want to leave on a high note, is that the whole goal is that we want to, these are great questions, great things, concepts to bring up, is that we can talk probably another hour about obstacles and things. The thing we're trying to get to is commitment to, a community to commit to a Bill of Rights, a charter, to say that all of the organizations working in there, whether it be Northland Adaptive, the school district, the Parks Department, the outdoor groups that are getting lots of money in Duluth from a half and half tax. We've built incredible infrastructure in Duluth for that, which is why we talk about Adventure Gap. We've built stuff for people that are already doing these things, and we have kids that